Your Steve Jones Show podcast is loading now. The Steve Jones Show podcast is sponsored by Sunbury Motors, North 4th Street in Sunbury, and Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf. Sports talk where your voice counts. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. Now from the Sunbury Motors Studio, here's Steve Jones.
Tuesday. Great to be with you on this Wednesday as we roll through with you. And don't forget, coming up, Santa tonight. S-Claus, huge fan. 6 to 7. And now they show it on Facebook.
First time in the history of the show. Yeah, we'll have our Facebook stream at 6. So, WKOK on Facebook, and you'll be able to catch the boys and girls with Ann Blugis in the Magic Radio Room. Yeah, we'll have to show you the room here in a little bit.
No, I'm looking forward to seeing it. And of course, there's always that big kid in the hallway.
Oh, yeah, trust me.
Oh, you want another suit? All right, that's just fabulous. Yeah. Okay. He says he owns 4 suits?
No, he wants a PlayStation 4.
PlayStation 4?
Yeah.
Well, they're on sale over here at Best Buy.
Right.
All right. Time now for our play-by-play call of the day.
Down to Simmons against Jimmy Butler to the left of the lane. Ben gets Joel to pop out. Redick gets the ball up top. Embiid. 3-ball by Embiid. Up and good. Joel Embiid knocks it out. And the Sixers are up by 7. A triple by JoJo. 111-104.
Sixers Radio Network last night, and really a great game for them as they played at Minnesota last night. And you would say on the surface, oh, yeah, Minnesota with the way they're doing, that would be a tough place for them to win. Well, they walked in and won. So that's great. Okay, Andrew Callahan, 24/7 Sports, joins us. Andrew, welcome back. It's great to have you with us.
Hey, thanks for having me back, Steve.
Andrew, let's break down just a little bit the awards that have been handed out. Mike Gesicki ends up being a second-team Sporting News. We know that Saquon Barkley, a couple first-team All-Americans when it comes to being a running back. All the others are all-purpose. How do you think it broke out in your opinion?
I think this is fair. Again, with Barkley, it ties into the Heisman conversation we've had before, and I'm sure you've had with other guests, is just, his numbers are obviously not reflective of the player that he is, but that's what we've got to go on in sports, right? This is, to a large degree, meritocracy. You earn what you get. And, of course, his performance is tied to their teammate. But people still with these teams, I think, recognize his capabilities and his rare talent. So I think he was slotted fine. And same with Mike Gesicki. I mean, this is, a pretty good year for tight ends, whether you're looking at Mark Andrews at Oklahoma, Troy Fumagalli up at Wisconsin. So he's a great player, and I think they were recognized as such.
When you look at the job that Gesicki did this year, because we've obviously talked a lot about Barkley, what did you like about what Mike Gesicki did this year, and what do you see him as at the next level in terms of where he can get to?
Well, I like what I saw from Mike was there was certainly an improvement, in his blocking, which is obviously no longer a strength of his game. But, the most common block that he had to make, Steve, was with their split zone run, which is basically, an inside give to Barkley where he's got the opportunity to bounce back. And as he's getting the handoff, you see Mike go from one side of the offensive line to the other. He'll make a block of an unblocked defensive end. So he was able to handle that pretty consistently. Sometimes he'd come inside against the defensive tackle or go on the outside. The blocking improved. And I think just he was able to stay consistent throughout the year. Had a very good year a year ago, but I know had trouble maintaining his weight in 2016. And that just speaks to the conditioning work and all the strength work he had. And just was able to continue that on from, 2016. It was a great year, but it was really 1 out of 3 that you had seen from him. So the fact that he was able to repeat that and really improve upon the weakest parts of his game, I think is a real credit to him and the work that he put in.
Pro Football Focus, of course, does grades on everyone, Andrew. You always watch a lot of tape. A guy that you actually gave a pretty good grade to is Steven Gonzalez. When you watch the guys up front, what did you see on tape, and what did you see from Gonzalez?
I thought Gonzalez did a good job. In my mind, that was a curious selection. And, again, their grades are not – they're made by a variety of different people. I'm not speaking specific to Steven, one game to the next. But it's always important to keep in mind because they do such a great volume of work, not only at the college level, but pro level. And that takes, a great number of people. So inherently, their grades are going to be a little inconsistent from team to team. conference to conference. And I think when you look at Steve, we had heard calls for him to be a little bit more consistent and physical, not only just from fans or media, but James Franklin and Matt Limegoer. To me, I think the better selection would have been Brendan Mann. Steven Gonzalez was better, than a year ago. It wasn't as big of a drop-off between his run blocking and pass protection. But, when you're looking at the best performances by Penn State offensive linemen, I probably would have gone in a different direction.
All right, which then brings up the middle of that line. Connor McGovern, Steven Gonzalez, Brendan Mann. At some point, someone else, a combination of people are going to have to handle Vita Vea. You've now started to look at some tape of that. How tough a handle is this guy, and does he need multiple attention?
He does. And to be honest, Steve, I think this is going to be the biggest test they've seen in the last 2 seasons. So, Mann, McGovern, and Gonzalez, of course, were all there at the end of last year. They had a big problem with, I'll call him Stevie T, who's a nose tackle for USC, went on to be a draft pick. His last name is full of consonants and about 13 letters long. But basically, he was the guy who shut down the inside running game in that fourth quarter of the Rose Bowl and was the biggest reason why Penn State just couldn't score when it needed to and run out the clock. Vita Vea is a better player. He's bigger. He's more explosive. He's a better pass rusher. He's going to be a top 10, if not top 15, top 20 pick in the NFL draft. Stevie T went, and I believe, the 6th round of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So, the draft projection always doesn't correlate to your quality of player at the college level, but in this case it does. He's outstanding, and it's going to be a real problem for Penn State's offensive line.
I think one of the guys in the last 10 years that always impressed me at Penn State was Jordan Hill, because Jordan Hill was not only explosive on the line of scrimmage, but he also had the ability to use his hands like a linebacker would use his hands. When I watch Vita Vea, Andrew, I see the same thing except in a much bigger man. When you look at him on tape, what about his ability to use his hands effectively?
Yeah, they're heavy, they're violent, and he's able to keep a keen awareness, obviously. It's not just this, tunnel vision to get into the backfield and penetrate and leave an open gap behind him or to either side to side. He's under control. He uses that power and that strength and athleticism, and the perfect combination, really. And that's what makes him so dynamic. 6'5", 350-pound guys are, of course, rare, but those who have the ability to use every single pound and ounce of, their body and their power is perhaps the rarest thing you'd find in football. So the hands are impressive. It's just really the total package with him. And again, why, you might say with someone of his size, okay, we can wear him out if we go up tempo, or perhaps if we can work a couple of trap blocks. They're going to have to use every bag in the trick if they want to contain him. But really, I don't see that there is a way, because this is a guy who's also a potential Pac-12 Defender of the Year, in my opinion.
Andrew, I don't know how much you've really watched of Washington to this point. I'm sensing you've watched a lot more since the last time we talked. When you look at them, what is underrated about them? But at the same time, when you look at them, what might be overrated about them?
I think when you look at Washington, the first thing that comes up is Chris Peterson, right? He's a head coach of the program. He's an offensive guy. Took the offense to use at Boise State, and it's changed a little bit since he's been with the Huskies. And you really look at his offense, and it almost doesn't stem from, what you would see as, a normal offense where you've got a couple base running plays and a couple pass concepts you really rely on, and that's really your offense. For Penn State, for example, they're a West Coast passing game and inside zone when they're on the ground. Washington is really just a collection of plays that complement each other so well. So I would say is underrated about them. Chris Peterson's a widely heralded coach, but I think he's even underrated in the national level simply because he hasn't gotten to the playoff more than once a year ago. And what they do with all their shifts, their trades, and their motions, they're so multiple and so efficient at it that they're really able to attack any weakness that you have. On the flip side, I think when you look at what might be a little bit overrated in the instance that they don't have so much depth right now behind Dante Pettis at wide receiver. He's a guy, another high draft pick. He's outstanding. He's got the NCAA record for career punt return touchdowns. He's highly dynamic. But, otherwise they don't have too many options that I think Jake Brown can go for. So I think Penn State should certainly pay a lot of attention to Pettis, and they should be able to get away with playing single coverage to some of his other targets.
When you look at Jake Browning, is he a guy that can make the big play, or at times is he too careful with the football?
I think it's a little bit of both. Again, they had to be careful, no doubt, when you look back at their game against Alabama a year ago, where there's just such a difference in athleticism, and it's not seismic, but definitely noticeable with that defense. And you don't see that so much with the offense here with Browning. I think what they have to be careful of it as play callers that you got Miles, the running back is outstanding. So
Miles
they
Gaskin,
want to have a run. Right, yes. I've been following a lot of Penn State basketball, in case you couldn't pick up on Miles Garrett is going to be in with the Hoops program next year. Miles Gaskin is outstanding. I mean, he was a guy who nearly reached 2,000 yards this year. They want to be able to feature them both. I think Browning, if anything, he can hit that big play. But erring on the side of caution, not necessarily a bad thing. Again, they face good defenses, and that's something you might want to do against Penn State. But, if you're going to take a shot, you want to take one to the guy like Pettis, and that's what they'll be able to do on December 30th.
All right, let's get to basketball since you brought that up. They're coming off the win over George Washington. When you watched that first half, what struck you about the first half that you saw against GW?
I think it was the completeness of the half, offensively, defensively, and urgency. You look at some of the losses that they've had. Wisconsin, of course, are going to be a little bit mentally fatigued in that first half. NC State's a game that I think is the biggest head scratch for them all. But the common denominator was it just wasn't that urgency. They weren't in attack mode. They certainly were against George Washington. The press was highly effective. It's something I wrote about yesterday. Is I think they should continue to use that as much as they can, and that's what really led to just that complete game. They got easy buckets on defense, and that was a great performance that led to better offense.
As you've watched the development of Mike Watkins, Andrew, what are you seeing?
Well, I'm seeing a guy whose footwork has certainly improved. I think he's got more confidence in his offensive game, where it's a hook shot here or just simply attacking the basket, going for putback. We've all seen the dunk. I mean, that was flashed immediately last year, something that was going to be different with him on the floor as opposed to past years of Penn State basketball. So he's just becoming a more complete player. I think he's gotten a little bit better defensively with his discipline. He run into foul trouble so many times a year ago. That's been a little bit better so far. But the real test will be Big Ten play, right? I mean, that's when he's going to see the bigs that he'll see all year outside of Texas A&M a couple of weeks ago. But he's better overall, and I think that starts from the ground up.
Obviously, winning the next four, they're going to be favored in all four, and they should win the next four. But now it's a question of going out and doing it. What do they need to do in terms of quality of play to then show that they are ready for the Big Ten?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you asked that because I mentioned writing yesterday just about, things they need to do over these next four games. And the first thing, obviously, besides win out that runs my mind, is get a little bit more offense from that bench, and specifically from their backcourt. You look at Nazir Bostic, he has as many points as he does turnovers the last four games. Now, he was, of course, held out for a violation of team rules on Saturday, but he's a guy who Pat Chambers had pointed to as a breakout player of the year. So he can impact the game a number of ways, but he's got to get that offense going because they've only had 8 points from their bench in the last 3 games. That comes from him being shut out. And Jamari Wheeler, too, I think could really shoot a little bit more. He's only averaging 3 points per game. But right now, neither of them are very efficient. Yet Bostic is ending more possessions when he's on the floor than Shep Garner or Mike Watkins. So if you're going to take the ball into your hands that often, you better be able to finish. I think they need to get more from them. Satchel Pierce has got to come back. He's been a healthy scratch the last 2 games. And I, try to tinker with some more lineups. They've got such a drop-off right now from their starting 5 because it's been so excellent. To any time they dip into that bench, maybe some 4-guard lineups around Mike Watkins, play Lamar Stevens at the 5. Just mix and match a little bit more because they'll be able to do that against these next 4 opponents, as you said, because they're going to be so heavily favored. So I think they should take advantage of that before it's got to be all systems go on January 2nd against Maryland.
Andrew, absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for your time today.
Hey, thanks, Steve. Be well.
Andrew Callahan, 24/7 Sports. Great to have him on the show. We'll hear from him next week. Also, Ryan Snyder next week on recruiting as we roll through this. Coming up, Bob Grove. We'll talk about the Penguins who have been up and down. We'll reveal what Greg Schiano's contract may have looked like at Tennessee. And in the end, how really wrong all of this was. This was as wrong gets. Obviously, it's been a long time since I talked to Greg Schiano, but he was here for 5 years, and like and respect him very, very much. As we continue here on News Radio 1070 WKOK, brought to you by Sunbury Motors. All right, ESPN.com reporting that if Greg Schiano had gone to Tennessee, it would have been a 6-year deal worth $27.7 million. He e-signed the agreement, and the agreement was signed by then athletic director John Curry, who has since been replaced by Philip Fulmer. But the document was not signed, according to ESPN, by Tennessee's chief financial officer, David Miller. And the school says that because Miller did not sign it, the contract would be invalid. The school announced it was no longer pursuing Schiano after protests on campus and social media posts raised question about Schiano's past as an assistant coach at Penn State. I can tell you there is no past at Penn State other than the fact that he was a really good coach and a really good guy to deal with. I mean, it is stunning how an assumption and a falsehood has taken on a life of its own and cost a guy a chance at a job like that.
And many here across the valley have fond thoughts of Greg Schiano with his time at Bucknell.
Yes, no question. And they should. Greg Schiano is like I said, I knew him for 5 years. Really liked him. Great guy, the whole thing. But there have been assumptions made. Assumptions are awful, right? You have to deal in facts. And there is no fact at all to back up anything that was put on social media.
Well, it's like what I tell people with the word assumption or assume. Take the first three letters. And,
Tony Randall. Tony Randall and the Odd Couple.
Don't assume and don't be
Tony Randall was in a courtroom. Tony Randall playing Felix Unaker. He says, "When you assume," he circles the first three letters out of then you and me. Well, that's what. There are assumptions made and no facts around those assumptions at all. Zero facts. And I can assure you, zero facts around the assumptions. But there have been assumptions and allegations made that just aren't backed up by any facts.
Yeah, there's such a thing as hunches and gut feelings, but
No. It's not even a hunch or a gut feeling. It's just, I mean, it's that's how wrong all of this was. And if Tennessee wants to run their athletic department by mob rule, then that's obviously they've got Jeremy Pruitt now, who is beloved by many at Georgia for his time as the defensive coordinator there. Okay, I did the Tax Slayer Bowl. I know how people felt. Not totally enamored. Tommy Nobis passed away today. Did you see that? The first ever player drafted by the Atlanta Falcons. He was a great linebacker at the University of Texas. And when the Falcons started as a franchise in 1966, he was the first player the Falcons took in the draft and was a lifelong Atlanta Falcon. But again, for someone my age, I remember the Falcons being an expansion team. I also remember that my New York Giants were the first team they beat. I watched that game. I was like, oh, that's great. That's their first one. That's fabulous. They lost to an expansion team. Oh, well. But that's he was really one of the great linebackers out there in the 60s. At a time when the NFL had a lot of great linebackers. And the middle linebacker spot was a coveted spot to be in. That was Dick Butkus. That was Ray Nitschke. And Tommy Nobis put together a great college career and actually put together, even though he's not in the Hall of Fame, he put together actually a terrific NFL career. And he played... Here's a guy who played his entire career with the Atlanta Falcons, all of it. And he made the Pro Bowl 5 times. This is not just a guy who was on the expansion team. He made the Pro Bowl 5 times during the course of his career. Great player. And it's interesting. He played his entire career with the Falcons. His number is retired by both the Falcons and by the University of Texas, by the way. Texas has also retired his number. And when he was in college, he won the Outland, he won the Maxwell, he won the New Brockney Trophy, he was a consensus All-American, he was on the 63 Texas National Championship team. He's a heck of a player. Another trade by the Marlins as Michelle Osuna is dealt to the Cardinals, it looks like, in principle. And that's just another player out the door with a big contract, I might add. Now, maybe they're reshaping this based on on contracts, trying to get the number more reasonable so they can then make other moves. We'll find out. Bob Grove next half hour. We'll talk with him about the Penguins. There aren't many teams in the NHL as defending Stanley Cup champions that are minus 58 at even strength. The Penguins have scored 45 even strength goals this year. They've given up 103. Their power play makes up for it. It's off the charts. But there's a reason right now they're sixth in the division. They've got Vegas tomorrow night, and Vegas is 19-9 on the year as an expansion team. They're 6 points away from the best record in the NHL. That's remarkable. We'll talk about that next half hour, brought to you by Sunbury Motors.
Penn's Tavern is where you want to celebrate this holiday season. Whatever feel you're looking for, Penn's Tavern along the Susquehanna River can accommodate your needs. Mountain stone walls and wood floors can be found in the original dining area, giving you that old world charm. Continue back to the newly renovated River Room with 12 PA microbrews on tap. Grab a burger and sit back and relax in this cozy pub area. Penn's Tavern has the best gift certificate offer for the holidays. Buy 5 gift certificates of the same denomination and receive a 6th one free. Penn's Tavern, a piece of heaven on Route 147, 5 miles south of Sunbury.
Rudolph, look below. Those 4 city blocks of new Fords can mean only one thing. We're at Sunbury Motors Ford.
Santa's right. Only one Ford dealer in Central PA has 4 city blocks of new Fords. It's Sunbury Motors Ford. This holiday season, stop in and see why SMC was voted Best in the Valley, Reader's Choice for Best Car Dealership in the Valley for 2 years in a row. SMC has over 88 new Ford trucks with savings up to $13,500. Choose from 33 new 2017 Ford Escapes starting as low as $19,775. And Sunbury Motors Ford has financing as low as 0% for up to 72 months on select models.
A new car or truck from Sunbury Motors is a gift the whole family can enjoy.
Sunbury Motors Ford in the North 4th Street Auto Plaza, serving all of Pennsylvania for over 102 years.
Naughty or nice, SMC is where you want to be.
Taking your calls at 800-795-9565. This is The Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. Now, from the Sunbury Motors Studio, here's Steve Jones.
You have no idea the professional thrill of sitting in the Mark Lawrence studio. I mean, you just feel like you are at the seat of power.
Oh, did we rename it? I wasn't aware of that.
Where I'm staring down a fictional Joe McGranahan. Now, during the break, they gave me a tour of the Magic Radio studio.
Isn't that cool?
And it's really, really cool. And I was telling Sean the story. We'll get to Bob Grove here in a moment. I was telling him the story that 35 years ago or so, one of the stations I was working at, only one time, not like WKOK, where it's an 85-year tradition of every night between 6 and 7 having Santa, and the Magic Radio. That for one night we would have Santa on the show when Santa wasn't on WKOK. We were able to, get a time when Santa wasn't here, so we got Santa on the show with us. And they said, it'd be really great if you could be on the show with Santa. I said, why? They said, because you're the one that has kids. I said, oh. So this is obviously not the level. This is a Santa's helper Santa.
Sure.
This is a mall Santa.
Yeah.
As opposed to the real one we have with the Magic Radio here.
Head honcho.
Yes. I mean, the top dog.
Big kahuna.
Yeah. Big man on campus.
Number one in charge.
Yeah,
yep.
Absolutely.
Righto.
So we have one of the helper dudes. And he go, ho, ho, ho. And this was back in a time where, there's always trends in toys. And so I'm sitting there and, let's go to Sarah in Bellefonte.
Right.
And she comes on with her cute little voice. She says, hi, Santa. And of course, he's really great with her, very nice. And then says, she says, My Little Pony. And he says, "You want a pony?" So they're going, "Oh, this is going to be just a disaster." and I looked over. I said, "Oh, Santa, always the kidder, always thinking big. Of course, little Sarah wants to have My Little Pony." I said, "It's the hot toy this year." He goes, "Oh, yes, My Little Pony." I'm like, "Oh." So then little Bobby calls up from Port Matilda, right? And little Bobby says, "Oh, Santa, I'd like a Transformer." Right? And he goes, "A Transformer? I'm not kidding you. You mean one of those big things that sits on a telephone pole? That's what you want?" So they go, "I am not getting paid enough for this." I then had to describe and explain the toy to Santa, to which he then, to his credit, played along. Oh, my God. I'm just looking at the clock saying, we cannot get to 6 o'clock fast enough. So thanks for the tour of the Magic Radio Studio with the Christmas tree, the beautiful Coca-Cola, WKOK, 2 of them, radio stations in there, the holiday decorations, how it's set up for Facebook, all the names of the children that will be here tonight, how everything is set up. This is the 85th year of this. It is a marvelous, remarkable, fun, and to this area, an important tradition, and proud to have even a small part in it. So appreciate that. All right, let's talk a little hockey. Since it's 21 degrees with a wind chill of 2 below zero, let's talk hockey. Let's bring in Bob Grove to talk about the Pens. Bob, welcome. Great to have you with us.
Well, thanks very much, Steve, and the same to you and all your listeners as well.
All right. I feel like when I look at the Penguins at, 16, 13, and 3 right now, I don't feel like anything's really changed since the last time we've talked. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the Penguins right now they're a good hockey team, but they're not a great hockey team. They're not a team that looks like it's on the way to winning another Stanley Cup. They've got some issues to deal with, and they just can't really. They had a stretch here now where they recently they won 5 out of 6, but they just got off a homestand where they lost 3 out of 5, and they've been nearly unbeatable at home under Sullivan. So it's one thing or another that's bothering them right now, and you just don't get the sense that without changes they're gonna get where they want to go at the end of the season.
And the other part, above all, is their ability to win, or the lack thereof, 1-goal games. How surprising is that been? Because everyone knows how mentally tough the Penguins have been.
Yeah, no, and this was one of their strong suits last season. Was in those tight games they found a way to win almost all the time. They were really good, and this year not so much. This year they've had trouble. They've given up leads early in games, and then they've been able to claw some of it back, but not all of it. They've had some breakdowns at ends of games that have hurt them. So this is a team that's really kind of struggling to find any sense of consistency. And unfortunately, for the most part, even though they're back to the middle of the pack here, they're not scoring so many goals that they can just rely on that alone. They've turned it around. They're scoring goals at a pretty decent clip the last dozen games or so, but they're not scoring enough that makes them coast through games, and they're having to scrap, and they're not able to put it all together. So these 1-goal games, and they played more of them, Steve, than anybody in the league. If you can't find a way to win those kinds of games, then you're in trouble.
Yep, 32 games this year. 17 have been decided by 1 goal. Last year, they were 19-3 in those games. Right now, they're 10-7, and that's the most losses decided by 1 goal in the NHL right now.
Right, and of those 10 wins, I think 5 or 6 of them came in overtime. So They found a way to get it done in overtime, and they've only played 1 shootout game. So a lot of their losses have been in regulation 1-goal games, especially lately. And, a good example was the game they played against the Leafs on Saturday night. They fell down 3-0 after the first period. Game was over. They were the better team the last 2 periods. The Leafs started trapping. The Leafs weren't interested in scoring anymore. They were interested in protecting their lead, and they did it. But the Penguins got all the way, they got back within a goal and came within a goalpost of tying the game in the final minute, but they didn't get there. And so, the moral of that story is don't give up 3 in the first period. And starts have been a problem for them, and there have been a few few games like that this year where they've fallen behind, and then they just can't get over the hole that they've dug themselves. And that was not as much an issue last year. Last year, Steve, the Penguins led the league in number of wins when they allow the first goal, and they led the league, and they also led the league in number of games they won after trailing after 20 minutes. And this year, they're way down the list in both of those categories. And I don't know if these guys have take it on themselves to say, okay, we had a bad first period, no problem, been here, done that last year, we overcome this, we'll find a way. But this year, they're not finding a way.
They're minus 58 at even strength. They have scored 45 even strength goals this year, which is 29th out of 31 teams. They've given up 103 at even strength. Bob, when you watch them at even strength, why?
Well, so that's a team statistic, right? So the first thing you look at is what kind of puck possession do you have, and that's not as much an issue for the first couple lines, but it is for the third and fourth lines, and that's been the focus of the attention on the Penguins' inability to deliver 5-on-5 is that their third and fourth lines aren't driving possession. They don't have the puck a lot, those two lines. They're playing without it, especially the fourth line. Those guys aren't chipping in. Riley Shea, the third line center, has now started to chip in, so he's much closer to looking like what you expected. But the rest of the guys, the wingers on the third and fourth lines, and the fourth line as a whole, just isn't. They're not contributing anything offensively. And so, I think the way a lot of people look at this, Steve, is when you're on the fourth line, no one's expecting you to score a bunch, but they are expecting you not to give up a bunch. And
right.
So these guys are not only are they not scoring, they're not possessing the puck, and they are giving up goals, more goals than you want from a group that's not contributing. So that's the problem. And the Penguins' power play has been able to make up for a chunk of this because their power play has just been spectacularly good.
No doubt.
As we all know, what happens in the playoffs is you're not going to get 4 and 5 power plays every night. You better get it done 5-on-5. And these last 2 seasons, the Penguins were able to do that. This season, they haven't been able to.
Past 9 games, Phil Kessel has 7 goals. What are you seeing in his game, Bob, that is not just Phil Kessel-like, but then a cut above from what we've seen from Phil Kessel?
Well, the one thing he's doing right now that better than he's ever done it since he came to Pittsburgh is the frequency that he's taking shots with. He is shooting the puck way more than he ever has. This is something I think Penguins fans have been dying to see him do, because even before he ever played a game for the Penguins, that was his calling card as a goal scorer. He's got this phenomenal wrist shot, and people would say, why isn't he using it more? And there was never a great answer. The guy can pass the puck too, but this year he's come out, he's played much closer to a complete game, so his compete level's been better without the puck. He's really battling when he doesn't have it, and when he does have it, he's getting it on the net, and he's making some really good plays, and that's working well for him because he's playing with a guy in Evgeny Malkin who, as soon as he gets the puck, Steve, he's looking for, to a fault almost, is looking to Kessel every single time he gets it. And this year, when Kessel gets it, he's shooting it. And so, he's on pace to have a career year for a number of shots, and he's going to have more goals and points than he's had in any season he's been here in Pittsburgh.
Now that Matt Murray is back, does Mike Sullivan have to figure out what the right workload is for him or not?
I think it's business as usual, to be honest with you. I think, Tristan Jarry's been very good. No question about it. No question. But it's still Matt Murray's, it's still his cage. He's the number one guy, and I think he gets the majority of the starts. So, you play Jarry in, second nights of back-to-backs, and, you might play him when you have maybe 3 and 4 situations. Maybe he gets an extra game here or there. But I still think you're playing Matt Murray, at the usual pace that is so that he's going to play, 55, 60 games. I think that's where they want him to be.
You and I both know the Penguins have played more games than any team in the NHL the last 2 years because they're the one that's gone to the final and won it each of the last 2 years. At times, do they seem tired?
I'll answer that this way, because this has been a point of discussion since the beginning of the season in Pittsburgh. At times, I guess you could make the case that they look tired because they're certainly not stringing together 60-minute games. And the issue has been, as we just said, the starts starts to their games haven't been great. So I would say it looks that way. It might be a little bit of that, but it shouldn't. It really shouldn't be a factor for me. It just should not. You've played more than everybody else, and yes, it's going to take a toll. But I don't think it's going to take such a toll that it gets reflected in your play throughout the season. They have a tough schedule this season, 19 back-to-backs, most in the league. I get all of that, but
yeah,
I think they've got to rise. They just have to find a way to rise above it. And the way and this is the thing, Steve, is the way to do that is, as we said, is you manage their time when they're not playing. Maybe you don't practice every day, right? The way you travel, the coach and the staff can do all kinds of things to help them along the way. But once the 60-minute game is in front of them, the best way to deal with this is to come as close as you can to being able to roll 4 lines. Don't have a 4th line that can only give you 5. They're not playing well. You need those guys to get you 8 or 9 minutes, or 10 minutes, or whatever the case may be. More like 8 or 9 with the Penguins, so that you have faith in these guys, you have confidence in these guys, and you don't have to load your top line up with minutes because you're trailing in games, and they have to play more because you can't put the 4th line out when you're trailing in the 3rd period. So that's the way you manage that is start games better. Be in games so that you can be more closely in a situation where you can roll your lines, and then that helps everybody.
The Vegas Golden Knights will be next tomorrow night at 10 at T-Mobile. They're 19-9-2. I don't know how much you've had a chance to watch them at all, but as an expansion team, how impressed are you by the start?
I've never seen an expansion team play the way these guys do. Never. They're the star of the NHL right now for me. I mean, Tampa's been the best team, but I'm going to be honest with you. This team was smartly built by George McPhee. He took advantage. It probably gave him a better team than any other expansion team in the history of the league has ever had a chance to have, but he took advantage of it. He played his cards right. He got some guys and you go through their lineup, Steve, and you look at some of the stuff they're doing, and you look at guys like William Karlsson in Columbus. He's one of their leading scorers. Jonathan Marsh is showing. Of course, they've got a handful of Penguins. David Perron's been like reborn in Vegas. James Neal's been great. He put together a team that is highly competitive. They're quick. And they really work well with Gerard Gallant, their coach. They've got a lot going for them. This team, it is amazing to me that we are approaching Christmas, and this is an expansion team, and they are 6 points away from being the number 1 overall team in the league. You've never seen anything like this in the history of the NHL, and it's amazing to watch.
It is, and not only that, but in their market, they really needed this in their market to get, because you have that little honeymoon when you're an expansion team. To do this right away, I mean, is really amazing.
No, that's exactly right. So you figured they're going to be in Vegas, and you try to introduce. I mean, they've had an ECHL team for years in Vegas, et cetera. But you try to introduce a wider audience and a different audience with all the people that move in and out of Vegas. Hey, isn't hockey fun? Come watch Vegas play. We're a lot of fun. Blah blah blah. Maybe we don't win so much in the first couple of years, but now they've turned that completely on its head. They've been unbelievable on home ice. Their play has been great. Now they lost last night in a shootout, but it's been amazing to watch, and this is the perfect start to a franchise for them. Absolutely perfect. Instead of McPhee now having to sit around and think about, okay, whose contract's coming up and who do I have to cut loose for next year, he's gonna go to the deadline. He might be a buyer.
Yeah. How about that? I want to ask you a couple big picture questions. Seattle did approve improvements to Key Arena, and it's going to be, I don't know, $400 million, some number like that they're going to put into Key Arena, which now puts them in a spot where they've applied for an expansion team. Now, you and I both know Quebec City, if they were to give them an expansion team, they'd be sold out in seconds. But the NHL is about markets.
Yep.
What did you think when you heard about the Seattle application on expansion?
Well, I first thought that they finally got their act together in Seattle, because they would have had a chance to be Vegas if they'd have had their act together and had an arena plan put together and ownership and the whole thing. That would have been Seattle. And then you wondered if it was ever going to happen because they couldn't find a way to get a plan together that worked for everybody. Now they've done it, and take it to the bank. They're the next expansion team.
Bob, thanks so much. Bob Grove joining us as we talk hockey with him. We'll wrap things up in a moment on News Radio 1070 WKOK. All right, don't forget news coming up, the news block coming up just after 5 o'clock, and then Santa and the Magic Radio here this evening from 6 to 7. You know, all the youngsters get an ornament, and Sean showed me the ornament, and beautiful ornament that each one of them gets. And then I looked at the back and it said, if you need digital media, call what the heck was that about? Right?
They added that in this year. I missed that.
What the heck? There's more desperation in that department than I realized.
Really?
Oh, my goodness.
Got to finish the year strong.
Or just finish the year. I
don't know. He kicked a figure to us yesterday. It sounded pretty rich in my book, but
and then I ran the figure past me. Something tells me that that was under the category, I caught a fish this big. I think that's what that moment ended up being.
The story gets better as time goes on.
No, so far it hasn't. Oh, my goodness. All right. We've got next week we're going to have a round table, or is that actually 2 weeks? 2 weeks before the bowl game, a round table with Trey Bauer and Todd Sadowski, my cohorts on WHVL on the Blue White Tailgate. And also Jack Ham and Derek Williams will be coerced into joining the show on the 29th from Scottsdale. And that's what we're going to do. I mean, it's amazing how coercion. I'm sorry, Derek. If you don't do my show, we won't be going down to the sideline for any reports. Even though I have zero control over that.
Right. He's like, finally a sideline where I'm not going to be cold.
Oh, believe me. The bowl thing is great for him. He's like, yeah. Although last year the Rose Bowl was only in the 50s. One of the chilliest ever. Now this is, if they want, it could be indoors in the spaceship. You know, the roof, that they'll probably keep the roof closed. But this is the neat place where you have to step up onto the field. Because the field is grown outside. Where they water it, give it plenty of sunshine, then they hit a button and the field rolls into the stadium.
That's pretty cool.
That's really cool. I'd like to do that with my yard. Hey, I hit a button, man. I got a backyard. That's great. Hey, a lot of fun here today. We've got the big company holiday party coming up here tonight.
Away we go.
And don't forget about Santa this evening from 6 to 7. And then Shikellamy and Lord's Regional coming up this evening with Kevin and the Chief. Sean, always a pleasure. Today's show brought to you by Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf on News Radio 1070 WKOK.
Your station for news, weather, business, and CBS Sports Radio. News Radio 1070 WKOK Sunbury and on WKOK.com.